HBO has a show coming on, I think it's tomorrow night, called Confirmation, about the Anita Hill hearings, about the hearings where Anita Hill
You hear that
testified.
rumble? They all went, ooh.
Well, I think a lot of people went, ooh, what the hell does that mean? Because this was 1991. There are many people in the audience who weren't alive in 1991, so let me review it for you folks. In 1991, there was one black member of the Supreme Court. That was Thurgood Marshall. He had been appointed in 1967. He died. So there was something called the black seat. It was an unspoken rule that, hey, we got to have one black guy in the court. But in 1991, the president was a Republican, George Bush I, and he nominated Clarence Thomas, who represented, I would say, about 0.5% of the black people in America. He was not the typical black person, let's say that. Like he thought affirmative action was holding black people back. But of course, this was a Republican, so they found a right-wing black man to go on the court, and enter Anita Hill. She had worked for Clarence Thomas earlier in both of their careers at another government position, and she testified that he was a pig. He said things to her like he spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films, involving such matters as women having sex with animals, group sex, rape scenes. He talked about pornographic materials depicting individuals with large penises or breasts. He told me graphically of his own sexual prowess. If only he had talked this much from the bench. And ever since, people have been arguing over whether Anita Hill is a martyr, and I think she was. What say you?
Well, I particularly think about Anita Hill and the man who ran the Senate Judiciary Committee. His name was Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States. No. I mean, this is a person who hasn't apologized to her, but forget that, to American women, because she was a conservative law professor, very private and proud. She had been sexually harassed, and she dared to come forward. Did he put the other women on who said they had similar experiences with Clarence Thomas?
No.
Did he put the experts on who talked about this? Instead, he allowed a kind of grilling that was a second assault, sexual assault, on Anita Hill. And this was Joe Biden, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
I remember watching it and thinking, who is deciding, who's protecting her? You just assume that she's going to have some kind of really good representation, and then every single day it got worse and worse and worse, and you thought, how could that happen?
Well, there were only 2 women in the Senate in 1991. 2 out of 100. Isn't that amazing? Now there's 20. Wow.
Let's not forget.
Well, and there were also a bunch of women who testified on his behalf quite adamantly. Women of color, white women, assistants, lawyers, all across the spectrum who testified for him. And the interesting thing to me about the Clarence Thomas hearings is after this pretty salacious couple of days that you guys are talking about, the polling actually didn't change. And it wasn't that polarized among black Americans. A plurality to a majority always wanted him appointed. And a plurality to a majority of Americans said, look, if there's any doubt about these allegations, then we think he probably should be appointed. So it's interesting to me how even though the hearings are remembered so, there's such a flashpoint, that in actual public opinion, they really weren't.
Well, 3/4 of Americans at the time thought she was lying.
Including me. And I watched the hearings.
Really?
And I still think she's lying.
What reason?
What would she gain? What would be
you know, people wonder
there's
why women
corroborating
who are
evidence.
raped don't come forward. This is why.
No, that's not.
But, well, I mean, she was a very private person before and after.
Right, and apparently all
she's had 25 years to cash in on the celebrity she was going to get from this, and she chose never to do that. So what was she to gain from this?
I think the left didn't want to have a conservative on the court, and they did everything they could to have it stop.
She wasn't left.
Well, and she has appeared and spoken about public issues after this, and when it came to things like, for instance,
really?
Kathleen,
I've never seen her.
She was on Meet the Press during the time of the Kathleen Willie allegations because people wanted to ask her about this. And the interesting thing is
hasn't really
that she would
sought the spot.
No, I agree with you, but I want to say she made those appearances and she got very, they're very parsing once it was about Bill Clinton, whether he had crossed any lines. So there did seem to be some political influence about whether Bill Clinton had engaged in sexual harassment, even though there were plenty of people who said that probably meets the
Do you
qualification.
think it has also something to do with the fact that she was 35 and single? There is some sort of singleism going on in America, I think. We're single people. Thank you very much, those two people.
I mean, I think maybe most significant is she was African American and a woman. Now, so of course, Clarence Thomas was African American. He used that term high-tech lynching. And what you see happen is that so often you see African American women victimized. And in this case, people sided with the man. And also, look at the entire Senate Judiciary Committee at the time. Where was someone outside of a white man to protect her? Because the white men certainly
Do you think it would be
weren't doing
different today with 20 women in the Senate?
I think it would be greatly different.
Well,
and it would really be different if there were 50 women in the Senate.
I do think, regardless of what the polling showed and what people think about this particular incident, the fact that it was talked about so openly in such a public way, in such a striking way, has changed the way it's talked about for women of my age who came along in professional settings after that. I do think that's...
Well, thank you.